Adam is going to tell us a bit about building web APIs with his favorite XML database, Elemental. And, well, that's basically everything I want to say about it. Adam.
Thank you. Okay, so this talk would normally be perhaps complementary to what Stephen's talking about. So Stephen often, if you haven't seen him before, often gives talks about XForms. Unfortunately, today he's talking about invisible XML, so it doesn't work quite as well. But when I last saw him at a conference in September, he was talking about XForms. And we had a discussion there, which basically inspired this talk. I'm going to skip over this. I've been involved in the XML community for a long time. Some of you will know who I am. If you don't, I'm a software engineer that writes a lot of Java and XML code. Okay, so we're going to look at web APIs with XML databases. And when I'm talking about web APIs, I'm talking about I'm not sure you can really call it a standard as such because it came out of a PhD thesis. So it's not kind of officially defined anywhere, but it's called REST. Is anybody here not familiar with REST? Okay. If you're shy, that's okay too. Hopefully, if you have questions, just ask as we go. So REST is really this thing called HOAS, which is hypertext as the engine of application state, I believe, over HTTP. And it doesn't necessarily mean HTML. It just means that if you are retrieving a resource from a server, it should provide some sort of hyperlink to enable you to get associated resources or perform associated operations on those resources. So your API should basically tell you about how to use the rest of your API, or it should have a natural kind of grammar to it, okay? So it's easy to understand how to use. And when I'm talking about XML databases here, I'm talking about Elemental, which is a fork of EXISTDB. It's open source, and we maintain that, so I'll be using that for these demos and examples. So, coming back to Stephen Pemberton. So this is actually what it says on the Declarative Amsterdam website, which kind of surprised me, because I didn't somehow realize I was submitting my abstract so much as just answering a question. So somebody said, so what are you talking about? So I put this, and then it was the abstract on the website, and I thought, okay, well, that works. So Stephen was telling me in Oxford in September that he'd built a little application to back his XForms to store and retrieve the XML that he's editing in his XForms. And I thought, that's silly. And I didn't say that to him because that would be very rude. But I thought, you know, you could have just used Elemental because it has all of that already built in. You don't need to build anything. And he said, oh, don't really know how to use that or what to do. So in his honor, I'm delivering a workshop on it, but unfortunately he's not here. But this would probably be quite useful for him, or I hope it would be useful for him. We're actually going to look at 3 different ways that we could build this web API for Stephen, for his XForms. And whilst I put at the bottom, because it says we'll look at RESTXQ, that's just one of the 3 approaches we're going to look at. Okay. So this is an open question. So Stephen has basically told us this. He's coded a simple web API for use in XForms work. And I think it would be useful to look at those APIs and how we could build them. So what do we need to know? So if I came to you and said, hey, Alan, I want you to build me a web API for my application, what would you then say?
I often start with Java or something.
Combo.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think we need to think bigger picture here.
Right. What kind of data is in your application?
Yeah, that's a very good question to ask. Any others?
Okay. What are the requirements?
Exactly. What are we building? If I just come to you and say, hey, I want a web API, and Mohammed says, yeah, I've built you one in COBOL. But what does it do? You know, we don't know. So, what are our requirements? Good question to ask. So I asked Stephen, what are your requirements? And I don't know if you've had customers like this before. And I'm thinking of Stephen as my customer in this instance.
All right.
But this is his full requirements for his web API. And I thought, well, that doesn't tell me a lot. But actually, he knows that I'm a fairly technical guy and probably know a bit more about what he's doing than I'm letting on. And so if I read between the lines, I can interpret this into a set of requirements, basically. So he wants to be able to, move on. So he wants to be able to put an XML instance into some sort of store. He wants to be able to get an XML instance from that store. He wants to do a head on it. His words, not mine.
Okay.
So we'll figure out what that means in a moment. And he wants to post an element, I'm assuming an XML element, that is appended to the end of his XML instance. Okay. So let's have a think about those. So put an XML instance to the store. Okay, that requirement's fairly straightforward. He's going to have some sort of XML document and he wants it stored. No problem. Get an XML instance. So we've got some sort of XML document, we want to retrieve it. Easy peasy, right? Everybody okay so far? Mm-hmm. Good. What is this? Do a head on it. So he's talking about hypertext transfer protocol, specifically the head method. Are people aware of the head method in HTTP? Can someone tell me what it's for?
Just to get the headers back.
Mm-hmm.
The HTTP headers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, without getting the full
Yes.
file. So if it's a multi-gigabyte file,
Mm-hmm.
you can see, oh, it is a multi-gigabyte file.
Okay, so we're maybe thinking the headers will include the size of the file
And the MIME type.
and the MIME type, content type, yep. Metadata,
The
okay.
encoding.
Isn't it
Encoding maybe.
It's info or head for me?
Dates, maybe?
I think the browser would get some useful information on like the scripting information as well.
Could be, yeah. What do you normally use it for? What do people use this for?
Get the head. When you have the head, you can get the hair and the bird.
Yeah, you're
Caching.
caching. Yeah, that's a really good use case for this. So, and it doesn't. The head method isn't directly related to caching. It is, as somebody said earlier, it's just for returning the headers of the HTTP response. You get no content back. You don't get the body, the large part. And there's various different reasons why you would use it, but the most common one is for caching, or doesn't even have to be caching, just not retrieving resources for which you already have the latest version. Because there's no point, right? You don't want to go and find out, oh, get me that document, oh, I've already got it, but now I'm waiting for it to download, or that kind of thing. Okay. So if I reinterpret Stephen's do a head on it, what we're saying is we want to retrieve the headers, so the metadata about the resource, with no content. We talked that it might indicate the size, and then for caching, or for knowing the document has changed, one of the headers is last modified, so the date that the server believes the resource was last modified. Or another option is ETag, which is some sort of hash, typically, that represents the content of the document. So it doesn't necessarily give away date information, so some people think, oh, okay, that's more secure. But that whatever value is the ETag has to change each time the server changes the document content. Okay. So this made me sort of think, why does Stephen need a head method in his application if he's got an XForm? And I thought, it's really probably because what he wants to do is just get an updated document if it has changed. Okay. So I don't think we actually really need the head method for this API, because there is another header called if modified since. And when you do a GET request, when you ask for a document, you can send this if modified since with a date, And if the server has a newer version, it sends you the document. And if it doesn't, it just sends you the headers, the same as what you would get from head. And it says no content, which means the document hasn't changed since the modified date. So I think we could eliminate this head method and just use a condition on our GET requests, which is kind of nicer because it's less endpoints to worry about in our API. Okay, and his last requirement, post an element that's appended to the end of an XML instance. All right. Does anyone have any immediately strong feelings about that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Tell me.
How could it be still an XML instance when you append an element?
Well, that's a good question, right? So there's some semantics we need to understand. Where are we putting that element into our document? Or are we creating an invalid XML document? Yeah,
But you also gave it away. You just said, are we putting that XML element? And I would say, from my understanding, I would create a new instance and would update an instance.
Yeah, that's definitely one approach we could take.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I have some immediate kind of gut reaction to that. So some of my thoughts on that are, well, let's go a little bit aside for a moment, we'll come back to that. If I really think about and these are all assumptions, right? So I'm putting a lot of, I think Stephen is doing this, I should say I think in front of Stephen is or whatever, but his application's written in XForms, and what's special about XForms? What do we know? What does an XForm fundamentally do, apart from take user input? It's written on the slide. Okay, so with an XForm, you start with an XML document, okay? And then you wire up your controls in the form to the document. So an XForm is, okay, and I'm saying this guardedly because you can do all sorts of perverse things in XForms that probably it wasn't really intended for. But fundamentally, an XForm is there to create or edit an existing XML document. Okay? So, and this happens on the client side. The client always has an XML document the XForm is modifying, and then when you submit your XForm or you want to read a new instance for your XForm, it is sending and receiving XML documents. Okay, so if our client, our XForm, is always working with a complete XML document, as Yuri mentioned a moment ago, why do we need to have an update method, right? Because the XForm will always have a complete XML document. It could just send us the updated XML document, and we could overwrite what we already have. So do we really need some sort of posty thing? I don't know, because I emailed Stephen back, and unfortunately he was too busy. So I didn't get any clarity on why he wants this kind of incremental update mechanism.
Also, when it says appended to an XML instance, the instance is already in the server, or the instance was on the client?
So the instance will be on the client, but you'll have a copy on the server as well. So the client can update its own version locally, and then when it's happy, it could potentially send the entire thing back to the server. So I could just overwrite what I've got verbatim, rather than having to incrementally change things. But it sounded from his requirements like he wants to be able to send me a list of changes and then have those take effect to the document on the server, so some sort of update or patch kind of mechanism. So I gave that a bit of thought. So do we really need update? He could just resubmit the whole document after the user has edited it, so potentially not, we can just replace what we have.
Could be that he's logging to some external document.
Could be,
Well,
yes.
That's a use case.
Yeah,
No.
okay, yes, that's a good one, isn't it? So the server's got maybe some giant document, a log document that's got 8 years of logs in it or something.
Yeah.
Or it could be.
He doesn't want to download the entire thing to the client, add one line to it, and then send the entire thing back to the server, perhaps.
Or it could be a multi-user application, so that each user can add records to one document.
Okay,
So then you don't know what the latest state of the document is, and the moment you fetch it, someone else is, you keep refetching it.
Yep, that's a good case, and that sort of makes me think of like a chat application. Actually, if you built like a chat system in XForms or something, you've got messages flying backwards and forwards.
I think in line with what's been said, we have a license tool which has the XForms front end. So you have different licenses on the server, so you can load one, and then you maybe want to update the user's information with it, which is held on the server. So that login is very important, I think.
It is. Sorry, I'm not trying to ignore you. I just forgot to set my timer, and I'm aware that I'm going to chat for too long. So just give me 1 second. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying, with Satsonica, we have a license tool
Yep.
which it has a front end XForms, and then the server will be some sort of data storage of the XML file. So there'll be different licenses. Same sort of login feature is needed, and you have user information which you want to then load up, and then maybe you want to update it, edit it, and do all sorts of things with it. So yeah.
Okay. So it's a bit difficult because we have to balance these this idea of update. We're trying to fit this into a REST context. Okay. So REST is representational state transfer. So we have a document or a resource, as it's called in REST, on our server. Let's say it's our giant 8 years of logs, okay? And according to REST principles, if we're only modeling at the document level, right, we have to do a state transfer. So we have to transfer the entire document, okay? If you're thinking about REST and you want to be able to modify parts of that document, you need to have an addressing scheme that drills into the document itself, okay? Because this is representation of state transfer. We can't just magically do operations that aren't a transfer of the state from the client to the server. So this is where building APIs that maybe are a little bit more RPC-like, remote procedure call. You want to perform an operation on the server rather than transferring everything backwards and forwards from the server. Sort of bumps up against trying to use REST. Okay, so there are ways you can do it in REST. So one of the ways that we could do it is, as Stephen has basically asked for, which is like explicit update. So we create our initial document in our collection. We can retrieve our document, and then we can send some sort of post, which is going to tell the server to modify this document. But that post there, I would say, isn't really inside of the REST approach to doing things. Okay. Do you see it all over the place? Yes. Is it pure? Probably not. The other approach is this one, where we just overwrite the document with the full document, but this involves transferring the entire thing forwards and backwards to the client every time. And then I sort of thought, okay, so how can I make this posty thing more RESTful? And I can't really without creating a REST API that really drills into the document itself. So if we think of our log messages, right, I could have a URI for every entry, every log entry in our log messages. And then I can start doing things with those or adding a new one, right? I could put a new log entry into my document because I can address that specific thing. But if I'm just addressing the document, not really. So I tried to find a sort of middle ground. And there's another HTTP method called patch. I don't know if anybody's familiar with patch. So this is outside of REST semantics now. But the problem with post in both REST and HTTP is it's really overloaded. People use it for lots and lots of different things that it's not really semantically designed for. So whilst post is outside of, I say outside loosely because REST isn't even about HTTP, but if you're doing REST over HTTP, patch isn't really part of that, but we can use patch and it clearly indicates what we're really trying to achieve. So with patch, you send some sort of document that describes updates that you wish to make, and you send it to some sort of resource. So we could have our document on the server, and we could send a document against that document on the server that tells it how to modify the document on the server.
I'm still a little bit confused because for the REST APIs, always use post
Yeah.
for creating and put for updating.
Okay.
And I'm so confused.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you're using it backwards in that.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. But, so I've been round the put post roundabout quite a few times. And I flip-flop. So sometimes, and it's crazy to me because each time I come to this, I ask myself, well, should it be put or post? And then I go and read the spec again, and I don't always come out with the same conclusion that I came out with before.
Okay. I guess the question is, where do you get your URL from?
Yeah.
Like, if you want to put, then put where?
Yeah.
It's clear that put only replaces what's already there. So if you don't have an identity yet, then you need something else.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
post
Yeah.
create the
Yeah.
URL.
Yeah.
So I think it would be totally fair then to say, yeah, we should use post for number one because we don't know the name of the resource. And for, yeah, so it's easier to look at the bottom one. And then replace would be put. So we could flip those around. Okay.
I should do it because it's standard to do it like that. In the REST API, if you
The problem is I don't disagree with you, and I could argue that side of it as well.
Yeah, my mind is really going.
Okay. If it helps, when I'm talking about create, just think, oh, he means post, if that's helpful. Okay? And it's not wrong. Okay. All right. So, patch, yeah. So patch, we can send a document that describes the changes we want to make, and we send that to a URI, which is our actual resource, or even we could send it to a collection of resources, and then it affects every resource in the collection. So let's refine Stephen's requirements. So he's got 3 requirements as far as I see. Create a document, HTTP post. Yep, okay. An XML document to the store. Retrieve a document, it's a get. And I've dropped the head requirement because I've said we can conditionally get a document depending on if it's modified. So that's just a bit less that we need to build. And then I've used patch for updating a document. Okay. And we can look at how some of these work. And then in addition, because scope creep, and I got excited, I thought, oh, he needs all these other things as well. So how do I know what documents are available on the server? If I'm the only client, then I know because I've created them all. But if you've got multiple clients and a new one comes along, how do they know what's already there that can be retrieved? So maybe we want a list of the available documents. Because I was unclear on why he wants an incremental update, I also added the replace a document, which I've got as put, which I hope everybody is okay with. Yep. Delete a document because sometimes people want to remove things. No problem. And then it's 2025, so JSON support as well. Okay. Which is definitely my requirement, not Stephen's.
I have another question because your scoping is document all the time.
Yes.
Can't it be an element of a document?
It could be, but I didn't need that. And apart from maybe this incremental update, which was not well defined in the requirements, I don't need to address elements at the moment. But maybe that would change if I got more information from Stephen. So, and I'm not blaming Stephen at all. Don't mean to be down. I'm really happy he gave me this idea. So, okay. All right. So we've got our requirements. What should we do first?
Download Elementor.
COBOL.
Start typing.
And the beer.
Start typing. Yeah. Always. I don't know. When I'm not under too much pressure, and I'm thinking straight, I like to do a bit of design before I actually do any coding. Because I find it helps me later not just create a big tangle of code where I've kind of lost sight of what I was building. Do other people sit down to do some sort of design document first or anything like that?
Design,
You don't have to admit it if you
design
don't.
is architecture for you, or is design is UI, UX, UI?
It depends on the project and
Okay,
what I'm
yeah.
doing, but yeah, all of those.
All
What I wanted to do was define our API. So I've got some requirements written down on paper, but it's not really defined in any sort of type fashion. So there is a standard, which some of you may know, for defining APIs. It's called OpenAPI. It's quite good, actually. There's been a lot of momentum recently in the last couple of years on improving it. So I've been using this for years, and for years I used to get really frustrated with it because there was just a lot of really common things you needed to do missing from it. And its support for describing XML documents or messages that you want to send backwards and forwards was very, very lacking. That's hugely improved now. So I'd recommend you use the latest version, which is 3.2. And there's a wonderful online tool called Swagger, which helps you design and test these OpenAPI specifications. So I sat down and built one for this project. So we're going to have a look at that in a moment. Yeah. Okay.
No GraphQL.
So I don't know if you can, maybe I'll sit. Don't know if you can see this. Is it big enough? Yeah, it's okay. So this is OpenAPI. It's expressed in YAML or JSON. I'm not going to comment on how good that is or not. But the YAML one is easier for me personally to read. Basically you start here. So you describe your URI path and then the operations you want to perform. And you can be quite specific about the sort of content you're expecting in your request and the things that can happen in the response, different codes and messages that go forwards and backwards. So the first thing that we wanted to be able to do was create a document. So this is actually, highlight it, that is the entire, pretty much the entire specification for creating a document. It references a couple of common things I've defined, like headers and messages for bad requests, things like that. But if we open this up, you can see we've got to create a new document for providing content. So whilst I was just saying, OpenAPI support's got much better for XML, the Swagger API has not. So it still struggles to describe the XML components in here. Sometimes better than others, so actually this one's not too bad, right? So this is showing an example of the response we can return. You can also see a JSON version. So the way that I have designed this API is that every operation can be done in XML or JSON. So that's why you can see different representations, because as we know, you can do content negotiation with HTTP, right? You can say, send this request, but I only accept back XML or I only accept back JSON. And the server can detect that and send you an appropriate format. So I came in and I modeled all of our document operations. So we've got, create a document, get a list of documents. This one hasn't rendered very well. Get a specific document, replace a document, delete a document, patch, update a document. Okay. Excuse me. And then I got carried away, so I did a whole bunch of operations for creating new users in the system and groups and adding people to groups and assigning permissions to documents, because sometimes in the real world you need these things. But the bit that we're focused on today is these document operations. Okay. Everybody kind of okay with that? So what's really quite nice about OpenAPI as well is that you can do code generation from it. So if you define your API in OpenAPI, they have a whole tool set that you can download, and you can generate two things, really. You can generate stop servers in about 50 different programming languages. That you then, you have to actually fill out the operations themselves, but for the most part, they will handle all the HTTP incoming and outgoing and set things up. Or you can generate clients, so you can generate stub clients in about 50 different programming languages as well. Unfortunately, EXQuery, or the XML languages are not any of the ones that it supports. But I opened an issue recently about adding XQuery support, and they're keen. So I'm planning in the future to add code generation to create an XQuery server based on your open API. So I want to make it easier so people can write less code, basically. But yeah, we don't have this for XML yet, but coming soon. Okay, so let's come out of here. Okay, so we've got our specification. So I'm going to look at 3 different approaches, and this is where it's going to get a little bit more interactive, I hope, and workshopy. So initially, I think I said, Stephen said, oh, he built this thing for his XForm, and I thought to myself, well, that's a bit silly, you could just use Elemental. So can you just use Elemental? So Elemental has a web server and REST API built in. And will that deliver all of Stephen's requirements without having to write any code? Can it meet all of those things that he needs? So we'll have a look at that. And then we're going to look at 2 other approaches. So the first approach is you build your own web API server. And you can do that in any programming language that you like, really, I guess. I've used Java. And you can use Elemental either as a server, or if you're using Java, you can embed it into your own Java application just as a little library. And so I've built a web server in Java that provides our web API, and then it embeds Elemental as a library and provides an XML database to store, retrieve, and update the documents. So we'll look at that. And I've tried to make these quite simple and easy and straightforward. So hopefully it's things that people can use or relearn from. And then your other option is, if you're running Elemental as an XML database server, because it's got a web server built in, and because it provides XQuery, you can implement your own web API completely in XQuery. And there's different ways to do that. I'm going to use a framework called RESTXQ, which is based on JAX-RS from the Java world. And the idea is it makes it very easy to build a web API in XQuery. So we'll look at that and we'll compare them and see which one we like and which was easiest or not. Okay. So the first one, Elemental's REST API, I will just walk through. And then the other 2, I've got GitHub projects, which are templates that people can copy and paste and try it themselves if they want to. I can walk through where they are. If you don't have appropriate software on your laptops, I've got 10 development machines in the cloud that you can log into and use that have all the tools installed. So I'll talk about what we want to do when we get to number 2 there, I think. So Elemental's REST API, can we meet Stephen's requirements with just that? So here are his 3 requirements. So create a document. Yeah, we can do that. So I'm going to demo this actually. Right, so over here, I've got Elemental running. This is Elemental 7.5. It's just an application. I'll stop it a second and show you again. So let's make this a bit bigger. So I can just start up wherever you've got Elemental installed, and off we go. Okay, so it tells me that it's started and we're ready to go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create a document in Elemental in the database. So this is our first requirement. And I'm going to use curl, and it's just a HTTP client. You can imagine that curl is really Stephen's XForms or whatever your application is. So I'm going to use curl, and I'm going to put, although somebody has told me it should be post, but we're going to put a document. So let me just find one that I've saved from earlier. That one will do. So we're going to put, we're going to send an XML document. This bit here just tells curl to read the content of the document from a file on my computer called free.xml, which is my temp folder. Okay. So before we run that, I'll just show you the document we're sending. Is this big enough? I don't know. So this is the little document we're sending. It's very boring. We'll keep things simple.
It's a bit bigger.
Bigger? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to send this XML document. I need to authenticate, so these are my credentials. I don't have a password at the moment, but my username is admin. This is the address for Elemental, and then this is the REST API that we got from XSDB. And what we're saying here is use the REST API, and then this is where we're going to put the document in the database. Okay, in fact, I'm not going to put it there because, well, I can put it anywhere I want. But, documents. Okay, so is that a put or a post?
Good.
Because I know the ID.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So with the REST API of Elemental and by extension XSDB, you cannot put a document without an ID. You get an error because it's not a supported operation. It's just not something it allows you to do. So if I want to create a document in the database from my XForm, I need to have an ID for it in advance. My ID here is my-doc1, right? Just the file name, which is a bit unfortunate that I need to know that in advance. But let's do that. So, okay, and we have got a response back from server created. So that document should be on our server. So back to here, create a document. Yay! Okay, tick. We've sent the content. We need to know the document ID in advance, unfortunately. Okay, 2, retrieve a document. Easy peasy. Oh, well. Can you see this? Because I can't. Sorry, I've got part of Zoom on my screen. Okay, so let's get. Oh, yeah. We don't need to send any data. So retrieving. So I'll just move this bit. Okay. All right. Get was okay. And we can see our document back from the server. Yay, good so far. We also know that it has a last modified header. Okay, so it does. This does support that I can send a conditional header, which I will try. And this is probably going to be hilarious if it goes wrong. So let's take the date. Right, this was last modified. Move this up to the top of the screen so I can see what I'm doing. So let's try conditional request -h. If modified since. Okay, so we've asked it to get us a document if it was modified since this date, and it's told us the document hasn't been modified since then. So we just get the headers. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so item 2, tick. Update a document. Okay. So, it's funny because we talked about post and patch earlier. I think this should really be a patch, not a post, but the API that's already there that we have tells me that I have to use post for this, but there is a little known language called XML update, which is not the same as XQuery update. And in XML update, you write something like this. This is an XUpdate document, modifications, you tell it what you want to do. So we want to insert after this XPath, so find /x/c, then insert after that a sibling D. Okay. So this should modify our document if we send this and process it against our document. So let's try that. Post. Okay, so I'm performing post, I'm sending XML again to the server, but this time I'm sending my XUpdate, and I'm sending my XUpdate and executing it against, what did I call my document for? Okay, hang on.
My doc.
My doc1, okay, right. Helps. Okay. Okay, so it tells me, yep, okay. Probably shouldn't be okay. It should be like processed. But anyway, and it tells me modifications count 1. So it's made 1 modification, which isn't particularly helpful, but it does tell me that something happened. So if I go and retrieve my document, if modified since should have been modified. So yeah, we get it back now, even though we asked if modified since. And we can see down here, there's now a D in our little document. All right, cool. So tick, we've met all of Stephen's requirements. And I didn't need to write any code yet. That's nice. All right, so we've got create, retrieve, update, and we can round trip all of that. We've got conditional conditional retrieval as well. What about these? Yeah, so list available documents. I'm not going to demo these. You'll have to take my word for it. But we have get. We can just do a get on the collection, and it lists all the documents. We can replace a document with put. Just overwrites it. That's fine. We can delete a document. Yeah, no problem. What we don't have is any sort of JSON support. There's nothing that's built into that API where you can say, actually, give me a JSON representation. You can write a bit of XQuery code and integrate it with that API, and it will do things like that for you, but it doesn't come out of the box. But these were my bonus points anyway. So we got pretty close without having to write any code. And maybe that would be, well, from what we know, we've met Stephen's requirements, right? Those were his requirements, the first 3. Yeah.
Is XML update also capable of stating insert at the end? Because you were now explicitly saying after C,
Yeah.
And that will work only once.
So the select is any XPath expression.
Okay.
Although because it's running on Elemental, it's actually, you can put full XQuery in there if you want to. So anything that you could target with XPath or XQuery, you can do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, so we got pretty close. Nice. All right. One thing though is that API is very generic, right? It's not application specific. We're not talking about Stephen Pemberton's messages. We're just talking about banging documents forwards and backwards and updating them. Now maybe that's not a problem. If it delivers your requirements, you can just use it, right? Why make it more complicated? But people seem to like things that are quite application specific. And so we're going to look at building our own API that's a bit more tailored specifically for our use case. Oh, spelled that wrong. Okay. So the first one is we're going to look at using an XML database from your own code. So building your own application and then having it talk to Elemental. So I don't know how we want to do this. So we've got, how long left? About 40 minutes? 30 minutes? 30 minutes? 40 minutes. 45 minutes. So I can either walk you through building this example, or I can just demo it. Do people want to do some Java? Do people have the tools they need? Do they want to use a virtual environment? Do people want to go to sleep? This is your workshop, guys. So, what would you like to do? Do you want to try and copy and paste some code and run it, or do you want to just have me walk you through it?
Walk us through it. If you walk us through it.
Okay.
I can imagine that most people,
Okay.
don't get it set
Okay.
up.
All right. No problem. Okay. So I'll walk through this. So then.
You said these were in GitHubs?
Yeah, these are in GitHub. So my slides are online, and then there's a link in the chat here, and in the Cloud Amsterdam Slack, or you can ask me if you like. I will open this up.
Okay.
So it is
Oh, I see.
here on GitHub. It's all public. I'm not sure if this helps because you can't see the URI, and the URI is very tiny because they want to get rid of URIs. But yeah, maybe I should post this in the chat a moment as well. Okay.
One more question. Where does the open API design that you built fit into the solutions?
So the open API design is for my information.
Okay, so
At
it
present.
doesn't do anything.
No, it's so that I have really thought about all of the headers that go forwards and backwards, all of the error codes, all of the schemas for the messages or documents that are sent forwards and backwards. So it defines, the XML documents and their content and what elements can appear in there, or the same in JSON, basically. Now, in future, I hope to come back and show you that I can do code generation from it, but that's not possible in XQuery at the moment. You can do it in JavaScript or Python or PHP or Java or anything else, but I'm not using that at the moment. At the moment, I'm using it as a design tool, so that my requirements are really clear to me. Okay, so this is our little Java project. There's not a lot here. So in both of these repositories, I'll just make this clear, the main branch is a template, okay? And then the complete branch has everything finished. And, as a workshop, my goal would be to take you from the main branch up to the complete branch, basically. So we'll start with this, and we'll see where we get. And I might switch to, I'll try and make this bigger in a second, please excuse me. I made that big. Okay, I can make this bigger there, I think. Yeah. Okay, so this is a web API expressed in Java using something that is part, or used to be part of Java, is now a separate library called JAX-RS. JAX-RS is a set of rules, but concretely it's a set of annotations. So I can put this annotation on my class here, and it says if there's a web request to /hello on my server, this class will be used. And then more concretely, if there's a GET request to that path, this function will be executed. And the result of this function will be sent back to the client, whether that's curl or your XForm or your web browser or whatever else. And just to show that that works, I've got one here somewhere. This one. We can just run this. So let's make sure this works. Okay. All right. I'm going to split this. Right. So I'm going to try and request our hello web API and see if it works. So curl get, and this one is running on port 9090. Sorry. So our server is 9090, and then hello. Oh, requesty. Okay, so our server responded okay, and we say hello, Declarative Amsterdam 2025. Okay, good. So what were Pember's requirements? Let's create a document in the database, yeah, or in the store, as he described it. So we need to change this. So it's going to be like /document. This is going to change to put or post. And we're going to need to write some code in here to take the document that we're sent and store it into the database. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to rename this to document resource, just because I'm pedantic and I like my things to be named correctly. And I'm going to add a dependency for Elemental. Right, so my Java project needs to use Elemental as a library. I think I'm doing. Yeah. Should be okay, I think. Or maybe I'll install that one. Okay. Okay, so that's all okay. So my Java project's now got a library included, which is Elemental, or the core of Elemental, which is basically the database storage part without the web server or anything else. Yes, Jennifer?
Any way you could zoom in just a bit?
Sorry. I'm sat like this, so it's really big to me, but okay. All right, so I've just added a dependency on Elemental. So in here, I can now think about getting my request from the server that the client has sent me, and do something with it. So to help myself, I am going to just clone my GitHub repository, because as much as it is fun seeing me write everything line by line, I can just reuse some of this. So I'm just going to make a temporary copy of this. Oh, no. Okay. Okay. So, oh, that's too big for me to see. Okay. So, make this a little bit smaller, just for a moment, so you can see what we're doing. Okay, great. Give me a second. I'll explain this. Okay, so we've got our create document method. Because it has a put, we can expect content in the body of the request that's being sent to us. So we're being sent our XML document. So we have to put a parameter to our function here that's going to receive the content of the put request. So content here, our variable content, will be our XML document that we're receiving from the user, from the client. In addition, we said our function is expecting content to be sent to it in either XML or JSON format. And we're saying that our function will produce a response in either XML or JSON format. And then, in addition, I've got a parameter here that allows me to access all of the incoming request headers. So I can have a look and see, oh, did they actually send me XML or did they send me JSON? And then I can decide what to do with it. So at this point, we've basically got our XML as a string here. And now we just need to store it into our document. We might perform some sanity checks, but otherwise it's going to go straight into the database. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy over some classes that make it a little bit easier for me to work with the database. But these are not particularly complicated. I'll show them to you briefly, but you don't need to understand the ins and outs of them. I use such long file paths. Also, just skip. Okay. so we should get a couple more folders appearing here. I've written a little, what's called a service in Java land, and all it really does is it starts up Elemental, the database. And this is all of the code you need to start the database. And then when the application stops, it shuts down the database. So just making sure that you're treating your database nicely rather than just pulling the power out. And then there's a few methods in here to do things with the database. So to get a connection to the database, to perform a transaction, to read from a database collection, write from a database collection. Kind of standard things you expect from a database. Store a document, delete a document. And I've just written these in here to kind of separate the Elemental API from what we're actually trying to do to avoid some of the complexity. But you can think of this as just boilerplate code that you don't really care about. Okay. So over here, I can now inject my service. So what this means is when the server's started, it will start up my database and inject it in here so that I can use it. And then in my create document, I just need to store my resource into my database. I'm going to steal my own code because we are short on time. I'll explain it. Okay, I just need to fix my. Oh, I didn't bring those over. Okay. Okay. Moment. Let's import my missing libraries. So this is just Java, you have to import the things you're going to use. It's very droll. Okay, that one. Yeah, I have the same issue. Python or anything else really. Oh, and I need that function, but I haven't written it. Yeah.
CPDD,
Seems to be, doesn't it?
copy paste driven development.
Promise we'll be there in just a second. Maybe I should have started with the finished thing. Yeah. For you. For you, yeah. Right, what's the
You passed the test.
Required type variable.
You're hired.
Provided. Okay, thanks. It's a tough gig. Okay, there we are. I think an error there.
Come on, Red.
I just need to import this. Okay. To domain document. That seems so simple when you think about it. So like, do a presentation on this, it'll be easier.
It's conceptually complete, it's easy.
It is. Oh, it's the wrong. Document documents from the database.
Yes.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that's going to run now and compile. Right, so there was a bunch of code there, so I'm going to explain what we're doing. Okay, this first bit, what is this doing? Good question. Right, so we are, yeah, so we connect to the database, we start a new transaction, we want to, in the database we store things in collections. They're like buckets or folders or whatever you want to think of these things. So in the database they're called collections, so we need to write our document into a collection. I've just defined a constant saying our collection is /db/dasp documents, and then we are going to store our document. This is really the heart of it. So we're getting our incoming content type, so which will be either application XML or application JSON, so we know what we're storing. We've got our XML coming in from our HTTP request that we had bound into our content up here because of our put. We're storing it into our collection, and we need the database connection transaction. And when we store into Elemental, it gives us if we don't tell it the ID, so this is the difference between put and post. In our last API, we had to tell it the ID to create a document. In this one, we don't. Okay. It will give us a URI, right? It will assign it a random identifier, file name, and give us a URI for it. Once we've got that, we actually go and read the document that we've just stored because we need to get some metadata about it. So our API, when we store a document, is going to return a bit of metadata about it. And the metadata we need to know is when was the document last modified? Okay. So down here, we tell the server, respond to the client that we've created, and then we give it the URI of our new document. So that will be in the location response header, because HTTP put post, when it's a create operation, the spec says you return a header saying this is the location of the thing you have created. And we also provide the last modified date. So we can run this thing, hopefully. Let's see. There's a lot going on over here. MBM and run. Okay, and we should be able to curl. We should be able to put. We're going to put it into our new application here. So this is the URL for the last one we're using, the REST API of Elemental. It's different now because we're going to our custom Java application that we've written, so it's port 90. And then /document. We don't need any credentials for this one because I haven't bothered securing it yet. And that
Should it be a post this time?
yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, it should be.
Okay.
Should it? Yeah, it's going to create an ID for it. Yes. I mean, it could be a post. I can change it. Let's try it. Okay. Bad request. Ugh. Missing scheme. What do I do there? I don't know. Missing scheme.
You're just not scheming enough.
Input. Really? That's not bad. Yeah, document. Missing scheme. Scheme. The scheme is HTTP. Yeah. Don't know. Okay, that didn't happen at home. So let's just run the complete version.
Okay.
Which I tested. Let's just stash this. The idea was to show you can build it incrementally, but
to the future.
Mhm. What are you doing to me?
Clean minus F.
Okay, there we go. Great. Right, let's see what that looks like. Done something silly. What are we missing?
Well, at least it's consistent.
Yeah, but why? I did this like a million times yesterday. Same scheme. Oh, there's nothing weird there. Okay, I don't have time to debug this. That's a bit sad, isn't it? Okay, let's just have a look at it. So, because we need to be able to compare this. So this is basically the code that you need for a create operation. It's retrieving the content from the request, and it's storing it into the database, and then it lets the user client know. This is a get, so we want to, this one's actually listing documents. And again, it just reads a collection from the database, but then it has to do a bit of work, right? So the database gives it the list in a certain format. We basically transform it into what I've called our domain format, which is the format that our API expects. And then we return that. Okay, and we can do things with last modified, right? So if the documents haven't been modified, we're just going to tell the client, not modified. And it goes on and on. So this is retrieving a single document. You have to provide an ID in the path. So this would be like /document/my_document. The document ID comes in here. We get the last modified, the if modified since header as well. We can go to the database. We can read the document. We can serialize the document and send it back to the client. But what I'm trying to show here is there's actually relatively little code that you need to write for each one of these operations, and it's quite declarative in how you annotate your functions. Okay. So in total, for the Stevens requirements plus my extra nice add-ons, and this one fully supports JSON and XML, we've got effectively about 400 lines of code. If you ignore a little bit of that class, it just makes it a little bit easier to use the database API because you can just grab that off the web for free. So about 400 lines of Java code to build this API, and it meets all of the requirements. Okay, but this is like having your own application and embedding a database inside your own application. So you can do that in Python, or you can do it in PHP, or whatever you want. But the nice thing about embedding the database is that the database knows how to do clever things like execute XUpdate. So I don't have to go and write something that understands how to unpack a HTTP patch and, okay, this thing in the patch means do this, and this thing in the patch means do that. I don't care. I just give it to the database, and the database knows how to apply that to the XML documents. So I saved quite a lot of work there. And then the approach I wanted to contrast this to, because I can see that we're running out of time, I think, yeah, I've got, what, 10, 15 minutes? What time is it?
25.
45. Oh! Right.
We got 20 minutes.
That's 20 minutes.
That's under.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've got one here and it says 20 minutes as well. I just didn't believe it. Okay. So we can write all that in Java if we want to, or Python, or any other language. And then the other option is to, rather than thinking of our program as the main thing, our Java application or Python application, we can run Elemental as a server, a web server, and we can actually implement our API inside the database using EXQuery, which is a programming language. So I'm going to show an example of doing it that way, and it's exactly the same API as the Java one, has all of the same features. So I'm going to have to just make sure I've got the latest version of that. Oh, in the wrong place. Okay. So I start this one. Okay. So again, this repository is in the same way. The basic branch is just a skeleton for a hello world. And the complete branch has all of the code. So what this project is this project is laid out as what's called an EXPath package, which is just a way of packaging up your XML files into a fancy zip file, which you can then deploy onto an XML database or appropriate platform. And the thing that I'm interested in is my XQuery file over here called service. Okay? Everything else around here is just framework, and there's not a lot of it, but this is the bit that we care about. This is our XQuery code. And this one, as it stands, is just very simple, as it says, like hello world, right? So if this looks a bit like the Java code, that's because we're using a framework called RESTXQ, and it uses annotations in XQuery, and those are modeled on JAX-RS annotations originally. So how we had, at get in Java, we now have %rest get. And we have our paths, our URI paths that we're expecting to serve. Right, we're going to build this package. So this literally zips it all up into a .xar file. I can start my elemental server, which I did at the beginning here, so just run startup. And then I can go to my elemental server. Please log in. Upload my package that contains my service that I just built. So here's my XAR file. That's the thing I've just built. Okay, great. I get a little declarative Amsterdam, Stephen Pemberton Elemental Web API. Okay.
I've been wondering what dashboards.
Oh yeah, sorry, to be honest, Stephen Pemberton. Okay, so we should be able to now see if this works, right? Can I ask it to say hello to me? So let's just clear out some space somewhere. So this one is going to be a get, and I'm going to localhost 8080 list RESTXQ is the base URI, and then hello. Yay, we've got some XML. Hello, Declarative Amsterdam 2025. Right, wonderful. Not particularly exciting in itself, but we can take what we have here and develop it further to build that full API. So if we look at the completed one, because I don't have time to, unfortunately, build it all here with you right now. Oh, no. Ooh, that's the wrong place. I have so many things open. Okay. All right. So we've got a number of different things going on. So we've imported in XUpdate. We care about output serialization now because we want to think about producing both XML and JSON. This is our namespace for the metadata documents that our API returns. And these are just libraries that the database provides that we're going to use some of the utilities for. But if you remember our create function from before, that we had in Java for storing a document. In RESTXQ, because of the way it uses output serializations, you have to write a different function for producing XML to one that's going to produce JSON. But the only difference, really, is this output thing, okay? So this one says go produce JSON, this one's supposed to go XML, and then it calls the same underlying function, okay? And it's enough that the result of this function will just get magically turned into JSON, or the result of this function will get magically turned into XML, okay? We don't need to worry. It's a shame that we can't say, okay, so we're saying up here, we're going to consume application XML or JSON, but we're only going to produce XML here. This one's only going to produce JSON. I can't have two different output method annotations on the same function. That's just a limitation of how the output spec works, how you combine that with annotations, how you use it in RESTXQ. But the function that we care about is this create document. Okay, so here's our create document function. Just like before, it takes the XML and the content, and it takes the content type. So have we been sent XML or have we been sent JSON? We create a random ID, and this is for part of the file name. We decide the file extension is JSON or XML. Our file name is then randomid.xml or .json. We store it into our database. So this is how we store the document. We create a little, what I call a domain document. It's just the metadata. And then we return the response to the client. So we tell the client, yeah, we've created the document, here's its location, here's last modified. So that little bit there is equivalent to this is equivalent to that Java code we saw earlier. It's doing exactly the same thing. Now, I mean, I write both Java and XQuery, and I've been doing both almost as long as each other. But I find the XQuery much easier to understand. To write, to read, to talk about, to teach. But I don't know if everybody agrees with me. Perhaps it's not, I don't know.
Well, clearly not everybody. Because
well, if you don't know XQuery,
because most people don't.
Or if you don't use XML at all, then you're probably like, what the hell is that? You know, Java. So that's the equivalent. So I coded the entire thing again in RESTXQ, and I kept the function names all the same, so you can compare them. So they're very, very similar. And where did we end up with? In here, we ended up with 349 lines of code. So the other one was, what, almost 400? So it's not a lot of difference in the amount of code. The reason the XQuery one is quite verbose is because when you have to write XML in XQuery, it's quite verbose writing XML. Whereas in Java, you don't do any of that. You just work with Java objects, and it converts them to an XML representation for you. So those are the two different approaches. I mean, do you want to see it running? I can run it, I can build it, I can put it on the server. It doesn't really matter. I don't know if it's going to show you a lot, apart from, yeah, Adam can write XQuery. So the difference with this approach is we had the first approach, which is you take the XML database and you use everything it gives you out of the box, and you don't create anything special. And for Stephen's needs, it gives him actually what he needs. It will do everything that he asked me for. The second approach was, okay, we're going to build a custom API because maybe we want it to be more application specific, or for other applications, perhaps Elemental doesn't give you everything you need out of the box, right? You need some extra stuff that is not there. So I wanted to show you how you can build it in your favorite programming language. For me, that's Java. And use Elemental as just a database, right? You don't have to use all the other stuff that comes with Elemental. It's just a database. And then the third approach is, a bit like the first approach. So you've got the whole element of Elemental as the database running, but you use its built-in web server and you code your API XQuery. And this XQuery is, because we built it as a package, it's all stored into the database itself, so the code is in the database as well. And if you are not a Java or a PHP or Python programmer or whatever it is, but you're an XML developer, maybe this is an easier approach to build it in XQuery rather than Java. I don't know. So those are the kind of three approaches I wanted to show off, to see how they contrast. And then come back to this. So that's the one with using RESTXQ. That's the code. I should probably put that in this chat as well. There we are. And then, so in conclusion, yeah, you could just use Elemental if your sort of requirements for your web API are quite RESTy, right? So create documents, delete documents, put documents, patch documents using XUpdate. That's your only option for patch there, I'm afraid. Or Java implementation was quite easy, and the same would go for Python or PHP if you're just using it as a library. I wrote the Java implementation in an afternoon, but I had to learn how to use the web server that implementation uses, which is called Micronaut. So in the old days, well, I say in the old days, this will probably upset people. Historically, Spring has been a very popular framework in the Java world, and includes web server and all sorts of things that you need with it. And then there was a bit of a rebellion against kind of heavy Java frameworks, and now there's lots of what they call lightweight Java frameworks, one of which is Micronaut. There are others like Quarkus or Javelin. Spring is still huge and very, very popular, but I thought, I'll use one of these newfangled frameworks. So it took me about an afternoon because I had to learn how to use this framework as well. So I think an afternoon for building Stephen's web API isn't too bad. Side note, I actually find these really lightweight Java frameworks to be very heavyweight.
Exactly.
I think it's hilarious that there was this big rebellion against all the standards and heavyweight frameworks. And then they built like a lightweight framework, and then they're like, oh, but we need this, and then we need this, and we need this. And then you look at this lightweight framework 3 years later, and it's just as big as the heavyweight one, but uses all of its own standards, not the ones that everybody was using before. So it's, just goes in a circle, doesn't it? The RESTXQ implementation, yeah, no problem. I built that in about 3 hours. It also helped that I'd done the Java one first, so I pretty much copy-pasted the code and then just wrote an XQuery version beside it, because it's easy for me to do. If you're not an XQuery developer, yeah, there's probably a bit of a learning curve there. The XQuery one is nice because you're not dealing with low-level code. You're only working with elements and nodes and the database. You don't have to think about strings or integers or converting to and from XML types or anything like that, which you have to do in the Java version. In the future, I'd like to be able to auto-generate my RESTXQ version as much as possible. There are things in there that I can't auto-generate because I don't know what you're going to want to do. But as much as possible, I'd like to generate a stub or as much of the code as possible from OpenAPI. And I had a bit of a look into how I do that. It doesn't look too bad, actually. So I've opened an issue against OpenAPI, and they've invited me to contribute. So I'm hoping to, maybe for another conference talk, send a PR to them, and then come and go, look, you can have it produce XQuery for you now. And then I sort of wanted to open it up for discussion, really. To see what observations people had about have we delivered Stephen's requirements, and is there a better way to do this, or perhaps which is the best approach that I took? Yeah, so people have any questions generally about this or about Elemental? Now we have 3 minutes, 52 seconds. Everybody's really had enough.
When did RESTXQ first come out? Is that like 2014 or?
2012.
2012, okay.
2012. Although, was it last year here? Maybe? We did a presentation and paper for version 2.
Okay.
Saying what it should be. So what I really should have done is sat down last year and implemented version 2, and then came here and shown you a talk on version 2. But I've been busy.
I was going to ask about this new version, so.
So the new version is pretty well defined. The paper is like, when I sit down to write a paper, it always ends up being a specification. So the paper's about 40 pages and details things quite well. And I've spoken with Christian Grun at BaseX, because they're the other big implementation of RESTXQ. And a lot of RESTXQ was inspired by lessons learned in BaseX about using it, and some obviously from Elemental and XSDB. And he seems quite keen on it. So the next step would be for at least me and him to write a spec and then get input from others and adjust it, and then implement. Yeah, do you want to take part? You want to help us write a spec?
I can read the spec.
Okay,
That's right.
proofread. Okay, so volunteers welcome if you want to help us implement a RESTXQ too.
I'm curious how your open API design would work in the roster solution that Yuri created. Yuri, could you comment on combining Adam's open API design and RESTXQ and roster?
Well, you wouldn't use the RESTXQ then, but you can, so roster can read this specification, and then you would have to add, and this is I think currently missing in the specification, operation ID for each. Are there operation IDs?
Yeah, I put them in there.
Okay, so then, well, the operation IDs have to be function calls, functions. So I don't know. Depends on the format of the operation ID. If
they're just names at the moment.
Yeah. But what I found appealing to Yuri's presentation a few years back was that the roster solution locks down everything from the open API definition. So anything that's not defined is not possible. How would that be? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, insofar if you don't specify a parameter, then you don't have it. Yeah.
Yeah. So in JAX-RS, so you actually have to go and read the spec for things like JAX-RS really, because that's also where RESTXQ came from, and the Java version used JAX-RS. But there are certain things in HTTP that are optional, effectively, according to JAX-RS, and sort of the general idea of APIs. So I think, so if I had an API call and I hadn't said that it takes a header parameter, but the user had sent me a header parameter, that would just be ignored, because that's allowed. If I had said I require a header parameter and they hadn't sent it, then that's an error. Okay, and it will automatically generate the appropriate errors. So things like content negotiation, they're handled automatically by the frameworks. So if it says, your function says, I accept XML, and someone tries to send you a PNG, the framework itself will go, no, that's not XML. There's no such method available for this content type, and it will let them know. Things like path parameters are completely explicit. They have to be required. So if you don't declare, oh, we have this path operation, then yes, that's all locked down. Nothing can happen there. So some parts are optionally ignored. Some parts are required. And most things are completely verboten if you haven't explicitly specified them. So yeah, you sort of have to look into the spec there. And the RESTXQ spec sets that out as well, about what's expected. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Any more questions? Oh yeah, cool.
I really like the idea of using OpenAPI specification to generate code.
Yeah.
In my past, I've done it a few times with JavaScript.
Okay.
But one thing that I ran into a few times was we have a beautiful specification. We generate code from that, and that code we try to use as a bootstrapping for like the actual stuff. It just leaves a few blanks of where the actual implementation can go. But then you're kind of stuck when you want to add new APIs.
Yeah.
And because that's round trip
Yeah.
just breaks.
Mm.
Are you
Yes.
envisioning something cool there maybe?
Yeah, so I gave that a bit of thought actually, because that is quite horrible, isn't it? So you generate your API, and then you go and fill out all the blanks, and then you're like, oh, I need to regenerate my API because something's changed, and you potentially overwrite all the stuff that you've done. So from so I was thinking about it from EXQuery perspective, but what I envisaged was basically generating all of these stubs like this.
They're not on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you need share again.
Oh, that stopped. Okay.
There it is.
Yeah, good. Okay. So yeah, I want to be able to generate the endpoints effectively. But just like how these ones are calling to a separate function, what I thought is this would be in your own module. So it generates like the service module, and you say, my function is going to be defined in my module. And then all of these are just like stubs to my module, so that you could regenerate the service module over and over and over and over again without affecting your own code. And I don't see why you couldn't do that for any programming language, because anything where you can import from one thing to another should work in any language really. Yeah, because otherwise you just raise your work, right? So, or have to do some weird git merge.
Yeah.
So yeah, cool.
It's like a .h.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Any other questions?
Thank you,
Thank you very much, everyone.